up, everyone? Josh here again. Another installment of an atonement. One of the topics that's been... I got a couple things that's just been rooting around in my head, but one of the ones lately is... being sentenced to death. And I know that might sound dramatic, but just stay with me, because it'll make sense in the end. So, in my youth, I was just, at this point, if you've seen these, you understand where I was and the things I was doing. I was running the streets. Really wasn't an organized gang, but we were, our little neighborhood did kind of have a gang per se. A group of guys that acted like a gang without any kind of leadership, I guess. We would get in big brawls with other neighborhoods, and your violence and crime and drug and alcohol abuse, and I got exposed to a lot of this at a young age, and there was an officer, which, bless his soul, Officer Perigo. I'll never forget him. Never forget that dude, Officer Perigo. Somehow, some way you ever see this, he used to patrol the 3rd Avenue, Michigan Avenue neighborhood that I lived in. This dude at the time, I was such a little badass. This dude literally knew my social security number by heart. But he was one of the good dudes, man. He was one of the good police officers who cared. He would just happen to see me out in the neighborhood and stop and ask me, man, what, dude, he'd be like, Josh, what the fuck are you doing, man? You got so much potential. I see how bright you are. You're not an idiot. Stop hanging out here doing all this stupid shit you're doing, man. You're going to ruin your life. There's a better way for you. Go meet your potential. And, unfortunately, he was one voice against many, because I had a lot of other voices in my head in the regard, or, in the neighborhood kids. And they were all older, 5, 6, 7 years older than me, and they'd let me hang out with them. And, of course, at the time, I really didn't even know any better, but they were just kind of probably half-assed taking me under their wing, probably definitely taking advantage of me, and I wouldn't let them. I knew what it was, but it was kind of like, I'd go steal stuff, make money, have money to buy alcohol or drugs, and share with them, so they would let me hang out so they could get free alcohol and drugs, and I kind of had protection and access to knowledge and whatnot. So it was an exchange of stuff. But when you got like 20 or 30 of these little neighborhood dudes, and they're out there letting you chase your wildest dreams and do all this, and it is like, all bullshit aside, like, a criminal lifestyle is exciting and adrenaline packed. Stealing cars, getting into fights. That is that adrenaline can be the most addictive drug out there. And I think there was a long period of my life that adrenaline was my drug of choice. And I've put myself in a lot of near death, like millimeters away from death situations, chasing that drug. So Perigo, man, thank you. I wish I could have received that message back then, and probably definitely would have saved myself and society a shitload of heartache and suffering. But don't think that your words were ever forgotten, man. And don't think they ever fell on deaf ears. I even knew it back then. Whatever. I didn't make that choice because I couldn't hear it the right way. So that was a dude who was trying to breathe life into me, and I wasn't aware of it. I mean, I was aware of it, but I wasn't, ready to receive that message. But everybody else breathing death into me, it's okay to be violent. It's okay to steal. It's okay to do drugs and alcohol and fuck school and fuck authority and all that stuff. So I had a pretty lengthy record. I mean, there was a lot of documentation on me, but I had never gotten caught yet. And there was probably a few times I should have been taken, and I had gotten talking to instead. Which at that time I was just like, oh man, I just listened to what this dude has to say, and poof, dodged a bullet instead of what the real lesson should have been. But again, we're only ready to hear what we're ready to hear when we're ready to hear it. But by the time I did get caught for the very first time, put in handcuffs and taken to jail, I was 12 years old, in a stolen car. I'd ran from the police, and that was it. And man, let me tell you, I ran from the police. It was rainy out, slid off the road, wrecked into a metal building, went through the building. The car went halfway through the building, knocked my head. I was a little loopy. Cops pulled me out of the car, treated me like a grown-ass man, slammed me down, put me in handcuffs, put me in the back of the paddy wagon, beat the shit out of me, because I had a buddy in front of me in another stolen vehicle, who had made it further down the road, but at that point in time they didn't know who he was. And I thought I was a smart ass because they were like, who's his name? And I mean, there's this big gorilla freaking officer on top of me. I'm in handcuffs. He has me laying on my side, and this son of a bitch is just digging his knuckle behind the back of my ear, and it hurts like nobody's business. But at that point in time, nobody would beat me at anything. I would have died before I told that dude anything worthwhile. It was just set and ingrained in me. I was so defiant, and I'm learning a little bit of, I wouldn't say I'm learning psychology in the respect that I will practice it, but I'm just trying to understand myself. So I have a disagreeable personality type, and so it makes such situations like that very easy for me to, I would have never told that dude nothing. I would have went to my grave before telling him anything worthwhile. But in my attempts, in my world, of being a smart ass and giving him a middle finger for the punches and kicks and slamming around he'd already done to me while I was in handcuffs, and never tried to swing on this dude or anything. I fully surrendered. I told the dude George, and he's just cramming his fucking knuckle into my ear, and he's like, George who? And I'm like, George. And he's just cramming his knuckle, and he punches me in the chest, and he's like, tell me his name. And I'm like, George. And he says, George who? And I go, George of the jungle. Well, listen, I thought that was funny, and I start laughing. I'm in so much pain. This dude, like I said, is a gorilla, and he has whooped the shit out of me already. And he pummeled me again, and I told him, go fuck yourself, man. I'm not telling you nothing. So they take me down. They eventually caught my buddy. He wrecked too, but they eventually take us downtown and book us. And this is my first time in juvie. And at that time, it was 50 East Main. And it was an old, dilapidated, shitty-ass building, probably full of asbestos and cancer and everything else. And as tough as I was, it was still scary. And, but it was kind of also a badge of honor, coming from the streets, and people glorify that shit. So it was kind of 50-50 on it, and I don't give a fuck who you are. You go to juvie your first time, you're crying. And I cried, and I'd almost got into a couple fights, and all that shit. And the next day you go to jail, I'm in jail, sorry, you go to court. And, my mom's there, and the judge is there, and the prosecutor's there, and the judge is reading my file. And, I don't know, I don't know what his intentions were, but he's reading my file, and he looks me dead in the eye, and he says, "Mr. Robinson, I believe you're a career criminal, and that you're going to spend the rest of your life in jail or end up dead." Based on what I'm reading right here. Now, maybe he meant that as like a cautionary tale, and he just didn't communicate it right. But in that moment, whether he realized it or not, he sentenced me to death. Because a little bit of that was a badge of honor. I knew they weren't going to hold me forever, so that when I got out, and I did, and I get back on the streets and brag about the judge told me I'm a career criminal, and that I'm probably going to die in jail or get murdered for doing all the fucked up shit I do. That, that's a badge of honor. And when you're 12 years old, oof, that's stuff adults get told, not 12-year-olds. And the other end of it was, I honestly felt like my life was over. This dude had predicted or told me what my future was, so I accepted it. And then I tried to fulfill it. Part of it was also, I was kind of like, all right, motherfucker, I'll show you. I'll prove you right. Maybe I don't necessarily believe that fully, but all right, then, game on. And that was a death sentence for me. It took me probably 30 years or so to realize that. But it was. I really, that was kind of like one of the moments when I just stopped caring. And I knew it was game on. I'll do whatever I want. And I already knew what the repercussions were. There was no mystery or intrigue to it anymore. And I didn't care. I mean, those few little words that judge spoke to me stripped away everything. When you already come from nothing and you have so little. I mean, that dude, like I said, maybe he was trying to tell me a cautionary tale, but perhaps he should have been speaking more to hope and telling me a different way of doing things, or that different things were possible, man. Because I only saw what I saw. I only knew what I knew. So I don't blame this guy for what he did or the way he spoke to me. I don't think there was any contempt or ill will. But again, I did internalize it in a way. And I'm 12 years old. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing emotionally or mentally or any of that stuff. I just know that I already was hopeless. I already didn't have hope for the future. We had a shitty life, and there already wasn't much to be happy about. You're surviving, you're existing, and you're surrounded by desperation and violence and dishonorable behavior and all this other shit. So when somebody tells you that that's all you have to look forward to until the day you die, whether you die tomorrow or in 100 years, fuck it, it's game on. And I kind of feel like I'm not the only one that's ever been in front of a judge and heard something like that and felt that way. I can't remember. I ended up having to stay in there for 30 or 60 days throughout my little court process. And I got into a bunch of fights, and I didn't care. They were like, well, if you get into a fight, you're going to get in more trouble. And I remember feeling like, I don't care. What was there to care about? I got several fights. I got put in solitary. I got put in a hole. Every fight was 7 days, and I was there. I think I was there 60 days in Juvie County the first time, and I spent probably 4 or 5 of those weeks in solitary for fighting. I was 12 years old, and they put me in with the bigger kids because of all the violence, and I was in a pod of violent 16 and 17-year-olds, and I remember there was this group of 3 kids that they were buddies on the outside. They were there together for whatever, stealing cars or something. And this stupid little bullshit that kids do, like they're trying to test me out and ask me how to steal a car. And, people want you're always proving yourself in the streets. And they would tell me I'm full of shit, I don't know what I'm talking about. And then they'd like, well, how do you even steal a car? You even know how to hotwire a car? And I'm like, well, blah, blah, whatever. Back then you didn't hotwire shit. You'd peel the columns, but whatever. Or use a skate key. But, anyhow, these 3, you'd had gym mats on the floor, and I'd taken a nap on the floor. And the 3 of them decided they were going to pick on me while I was asleep, and they were spitting boogers and shit in the back of my head. And, I woke up and to that happening, and I swung on one of them, and we got into a fight, and then they just broke it up, and they didn't send me to solitary. And then the 3 of them, like the next day or whatever, the 3 of them jumped me in the bathroom, and they still didn't send them to solitary either. And there was only, I don't know, there's probably like 20 kids in that pod, and there was only like 2 white boys. So had that been reversed, it'd have been a different story too. The two, if it was all white boys and 2 of another race, they would have been odd man out, and they'd been getting fucked with all the time too. But it just was the way those cards were dealt for me. But somehow or another, they let me work in the kitchen. And after that. And so the kitchen was in the middle of the 2 mess halls. And there was a door that led into the kitchen area where the food was and where everything was prepared. And then there was 2 doors leading into the mess halls. And so a few days later, I'm in there serving food. They come up in line. The line would be outside the hallway. You would come in the doorway to your mess hall. There'd be a window where you get your food served to you from the kitchen, and then you go sit down. And I saw where they were in line, and I took a plastic milk crate, and it had like I emptied out all the milk out of it except for like 2 rows of those little cartons of milk. And I took that out there, and I beat the shit out of all 3 of them with that crate before, staff wouldn't even come near me. And I don't blame them. I don't want to hit with that shit either. And I beat the shit out of all 3 of them with that milk crate, and I got 2 weeks in the hole for that one. But nobody fucked with me anymore after that. I didn't have any more fights. Nobody fucked with me. Whatever. Which is kind of what I wanted. I mean, I was about revenge and proving my point to them. But also I wanted to do something where nobody would fuck with me anymore. But I did all that because I had been sentenced to death by this judge. I had been told that this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to be the rest of my life. And I tried to fulfill that prophecy immediately. And man, it was so discouraging. And I recently heard something about the and I've just, you know, I'm getting into this point where I'm trying to understand words and their meanings and stuff. And somebody had just broke down, to discourage somebody is to take courage away from them. So when you say discouraging words to someone like, you're going to be a criminal for the rest of your life and you're going to die in the streets, or you're going to die in prison as a result, you take all the courage away from them, and that's who they will become. Now maybe they should have said some encouraging words to me and gave me courage, because encourage, put courage into. And this is something I wish with my children I would have known all these years, and unfortunately I didn't really ever understand it, because eventually, being in institutions as a child for as long as I was, I learned through discouragement can work in a rigid environment where there's consequences, and basically they're just trying to strip the fire and the spark out of you so that you conform and you don't go out into society and wreak havoc anymore. But you don't have to get rid of your spark. You don't have to get rid of that fire in your soul. We're supposed to have that. We're just supposed to do good stuff with it. And I wish that my life hadn't started off with so much discouragement. I wish that I hadn't had the courage taken away from me to go to school, stand up to my neighborhood friends who were like going to schools for dumbasses and nerds and geeks and whatever else they would say. I wish that more people would have been encouraging. But there's nothing I can do about the past. All I can do is now. So my pledge to myself and to everybody is to try and be more encouraging. I would like to empower people. I would like to encourage them, and I would like my example and my words to do that. Again, as a way to pay back my debt to society for all the discouraging and all the unempowerment that I've done to the world and to people. It's been intentional at times because I understood its effectiveness from that day in court. And sometimes it's just been a reflex. But don't steal anybody's life with words. Impressionable people, adults, children. Encourage everybody. Empower people. Educate. Don't sentence people you love to death. I know it's maybe an extreme example, but it's really a true statement. This is really what happened in my life. This is really the shit that I've been through and done. And it was a death sentence. And I tried to fulfill it, I promise you, 1,000,000 times over. And it's only by the grace of God that I'm still here. But listen, empower people, encourage them. If they're on a path that's leading them down a bad road, man, don't tell them, hey, well, don't tell them negative stuff. Try to show them, try to explain to them why that's not good and where a better option is, and then help empower them to make a better choice, and then help encourage them to be strong enough and brave enough to see that through. We all only have each other. All this material shit in the world doesn't mean a motherfucking thing. You can have $5, 500,000, 5 million. It means nothing. We only have each other. We only have ourselves. We all have to do a better job. I don't care how good of a person you are or how bad of a person you are. We all have room for improvement. in relation to being better to each other and being better to ourselves. There's never an end to that. And so let's just do that. Don't sentence anybody to death. Sentence them to life. Thank you guys. Probably babbled a little bit on this one, but I don't know. These are all tough, and I appreciate you guys watching them or listening to them to the end. Hopefully they help you, if nothing else. They certainly help me feel better by getting it off my chest and sharing it with you. Thank you. Until the next one.